My chosen one, welcome to this space of deep contemplation, where the noise of the world is quieted and the subtle, sacred whispers of the divine are allowed to resonate within your soul. Take a slow, steady breath with me now. Inhale the peace and exhale the chaos. For a moment, let us stand together on the very edge of the spiritual realm, gazing back at the journey you have walked. It is a path forged not by external might, but by the quiet, internal furnace of your faith. There is a celestial record, an unseen scroll chronicling the movements of every soul, a testament to every victory, every moment of steadfastness, and every silent, solitary choice made in the crucible of your testing. And within those vast divine archives, there exists an account so profound, so deeply significant, that it drew the direct, astonished attention of the Creator himself. We speak not of thunderous miracles or public displays of power. We speak of the sacred geometry of your resistance. You, the chosen soul, found yourself cornered in the deepest, quietest valley of your personal wilderness. You were alone, truly alone, stripped of worldly comfort, with the shadow of doubt and the cold pressure of defeat pressing in from every side. The celestial observers held their breath. They watched as the enemy, thinking he had cornered a soul without defense, began his final methodical assault. He brought forth every weapon designed for the human spirit, the whisper of worthlessness, the memory of past failures, and the chilling finality of isolation. Yet, in that profound stillness, in that moment of absolute, terrifying solitude, you made a choice. It was a simple, subtle, and non-dramatic choice, unseen by the world, uncelebrated by any earthly voice. You chose to simply remain. You chose to draw one more deliberate breath, to hold on to the unseen thread of promise, and to lift an internal gaze toward a God you could not feel but knew was there. It was a choice born of exhausted, unyielding will, a deeply rooted anchor that held fast when every fiber of your being screamed to surrender. This quiet, solitary act of persistence, this gentle refusal to be moved, was the victory that reverberated through the very halls of heaven. It was the moment that demonstrated the absolute, uncorruptible nature of the seed planted within you. The adversary did not comprehend it. He was prepared for a fight, a battle of fire and fury, but not for the calm, silent defiance of a soul simply choosing faith over the evidence of the five senses. In that singular moment of choosing faith while utterly alone, you performed an act of spiritual defiance so pure, so contrary to the expectation of flesh and fear, that it illuminated your divine essence for all eternity. This is the truth we explore today, the profound impact of your quiet endurance, the depth of character that even the divine pause to acknowledge. Let us now delve into the 7 profound insights into your solitary victory. Point 1, the power of unwitnessed steadfastness. The initial astonishment of the divine was centered on your capacity for steadfastness when no human eye was upon you. Many can hold their ground in public, inspired by the approval of others. Your profound victory was in the privacy of your own soul. You endured slander, financial uncertainty, and betrayal, not for human applause, but for the integrity of the spiritual covenant you hold. This silent, singular commitment is the highest form of worship. The psychological weight of unwitnessed suffering is immense, chosen one. When hardship strikes, the natural human impulse is to seek validation, to find a witness who can verify the depth of the pain, thereby alleviating some of the isolation. In the spiritual path, however, the most transformative trials are often those that must be endured in profound secrecy. This is the laboratory of the soul where true spiritual alloy is forged. Think for a moment of the nights you spent awake, wrestling with doubt, or the days you performed your duties while carrying a hidden, agonizing wound. There was no audience for these moments. There was no person to pat your shoulder, no one to proclaim your strength on social media, and no public recognition to sustain your resolve. You were alone with the raw reality of the spiritual war being waged within your mind. The enemy uses this isolation as its primary tool. It whispers the insidious lie that if no one sees your struggle, then the struggle itself is meaningless, or worse, that you are the sole cause of your own pain. The world understands performance, a grand gesture, a visible sacrifice. But the heavens understand presence, the quiet, absolute refusal to shift your spiritual center, even when the tectonic plates of your life are violently moving. Your steadfastness was a sustained act of internal defiance. It was a repeated, hourly choice to align your internal state with the promise of the divine, rather than the despairing circumstances of the external environment. This wasn't a sudden, heroic leap of faith. It was the slow, methodical act of placing one foot in front of the other, day after day, in the spiritual darkness. This quiet persistence is the precise measure of a truly chosen spirit. The shock to the heavens was the realization that your adherence to the divine path was not conditional upon external reward or human verification. It was simply the fundamental operating principle of your being. This unwitnessed endurance created a spiritual vacuum around you, sealing you off from the chaos and drawing the attention of the celestial court. It demonstrated that the anchor of your soul was sunk so deeply into the bedrock of truth that no storm, however lonely or terrifying, could drag you away. It is in this profound solitude that the soul truly recognizes its indestructible nature. It is here that you stood alone, and yet, in that very standing, you proved yourself worthy of the divine gaze. The depth of your commitment was startling because it transcended all human expectation of self-interest or social validation. You did not endure for anything external. You endured because of who you are. This unwavering commitment, performed in the quiet of your heart, is the spiritual act that echoes loudest in eternity. This, chosen one, is the power of unwitnessed steadfastness. Point 2, the refusal to adopt the enemy's weapons. In a world that demands aggression and retaliation, your choice was to remain rooted in grace and peace. When attacked, you were tempted to use the same sharp words or malicious gossip deployed against you. Yet, you chose silence, prayer, and forgiveness instead. This is not weakness, it is the shock of spiritual purity, a profound act that broke the familiar cycle of darkness and violence, leaving the spiritual oppressors disoriented by the introduction of unconditional love. Let us deeply examine the spiritual psychology of conflict. The natural human response to injury is an immediate, energetic counter-response, a desire for equivalence in suffering. When your character was assassinated, your initial impulse was to defend, to expose, and to return the same measure of pain that was inflicted upon you. This is the trap of spiritual warfare, to be drawn into fighting on the enemy's terms, using the enemy's corrupted tools. You see, the adversary does not fear your anger. He feeds on it. He does not fear your retaliation. It is the fuel for his continued cycle of destruction. His ultimate goal is not just to wound you, but to compel you to wound others, thereby corrupting the pure light within your soul and neutralizing your spiritual influence. The profound, shocking moment of your victory was when you deliberately, consciously laid down those weapons. When the opportunity for a sharp, wounding retort presented itself, you chose a deep, silent breath instead. When the urge to gossip or slander those who betrayed you was overwhelming, you chose to seal your lips and offer a prayer. This deliberate choice is the ultimate act of spiritual sovereignty. It proclaims that your source of power is not rooted in the pain-for-pain economy of the lower realm, but in the boundless, non-reactive energy of divine grace. The spiritual shockwave this created was due to the unexpected disruption of the pattern. The enemy expects resistance. He expects anger. He expects fear. What he is fundamentally unprepared for is unconditional peace and unearned forgiveness. Your refusal to engage in the mudslinging was interpreted in the spiritual domain as a powerful shield of light. You did not just defend yourself, you elevated the entire plane of the conflict, making the enemy's low vibrational weaponry utterly ineffective. When you choose grace over bitterness, you are not surrendering to your aggressor, you are asserting your spiritual superiority. You are declaring that the truth of who you are, a chosen, anointed soul, is not dependent on how you are treated by others. Your response transcended the immediate injury and affirmed your identity as a reflection of the divine source, which is wholly good, wholly pure, and eternally non-reactive to darkness. This quiet, revolutionary act of choosing spiritual purity over carnal retribution is what stunned the heavens. It was the moment you proved that the spiritual seed within you was so robust that even under direct fire it would only produce the fruit of the Spirit, never the weeds of the flesh. This is the ultimate victory, chosen one, the refusal to be contaminated by the very darkness you are tasked to overcome. Point 3, the unwavering trust in the unseen timeline. The enemy's greatest weapon is impatience, coupled with the illusion that delay means denial. Your battle was won not by rushing the outcome, but by calmly submitting to the divine timing. You continued to plant seeds of goodness, knowing the harvest could be months or years away. This gentle, day-to-day discipline of trust, despite the lack of immediate evidence, is what displayed your deeply evolved spiritual maturity. The modern world conditions us for instantaneity. We expect immediate results, immediate feedback, and immediate gratification. This conditioning is profoundly antithetical to the slow, organic, and geological timescale of spiritual maturity and divine manifestation. The spiritual test of the waiting period is often more rigorous than the test of the crisis itself. When you prayed for a shift, when you worked diligently toward a spiritual goal, and when weeks turned into months, and months perhaps into years without visible change, the subtle yet devastating whisper of the adversary began. It is not working. You were forgotten. Your efforts are futile. This whisper is designed to provoke spiritual exhaustion and abandonment, to get you to uproot the seeds of faith just before they break the surface. Your profound victory here was your decision to maintain your spiritual routine, regardless of the clock. You continued to pray, you continued to meditate, and you continued to serve, even when the heavens seemed silent and the earth offered no sign of confirmation. This quiet, persistent maintenance of spiritual diligence is a defiance of the carnal law of instant gratification. It is a declaration of trust in a non-linear sovereign timeline, a timeline that operates on the perfection of process, not the impatience of human will. The divine shock was in witnessing a human soul subject to the intense pressures of earthly time and physical limitation, operating with the patience and perspective of eternity. You understood, on a deep, intuitive level, that spiritual growth is not like turning on a light switch. It is like the maturation of an ancient cedar tree. Its roots must deepen and spread unseen for years before the visible height and strength can be manifested. You chose to water the roots, even when the canopy seemed barren. This calm acceptance of the process over the product is the hallmark of true spiritual maturity. It shows that your faith is not transactional, a mere negotiation for a swift outcome, but relational, based on an unshakable belief in the divine wisdom guiding the entire journey. You demonstrated that you value the formation of your character during the waiting period, more than the immediate acquisition of the desired outcome. This is the quiet courage that astounds. You chose to trust the unseen architecture of your destiny, knowing that the divine builder always completes the foundation before raising the visible walls. This unwavering trust in the unseen timeline is a sign that your spirit is truly prepared to handle the magnitude of the blessings that are yet to come. For you have mastered the foundational element of divine patience. Point 4, the reclamation of your inner narrative. Every external attack first seeks to corrupt your internal self-talk. The world, through its chaos, tried to convince you that you were unqualified, unloved, or deserving of failure. The solitary thing you did that drew attention was the gentle, consistent act of replacing those lies with the established truth of your identity in the divine. You spoke grace to yourself when no one else would. This internal affirmation is a profound act of spiritual warfare. The most intimate battleground of the chosen soul is the mind. Long after the external noise of a conflict has died down, the enemy's most effective weapon remains active, the implanted negative, internal monologue. Slander, rejection, or failure in the material world is engineered primarily to shift your internal narrative from divine truth to human limitation. The lie whispers you are not enough. You deserve this pain. You will never be free. The spiritual warfare here is not fought with external acts, but with cognitive discipline, the deliberate, meticulous practice of internal self-correction. The astonishing act you performed, the solitary victory that garnered celestial attention, was the quiet, persistent practice of re-scripting your own mind. When the memory of rejection surfaced, you did not dwell on the pain. You immediately and gently pivoted to the truth of your unconditional worth in the eyes of the Creator. When the feeling of inadequacy arose, you consciously invoked the memory of a past spiritual victory or the firm, unchanging promise of your anointing. This is the profound act of spiritual hygiene. You refuse to harbor the debris of negative, corrupted thought patterns. This is an incredibly difficult task because the human mind, left unchecked, often defaults to the negative, a form of self-sabotage learned through trauma and societal messaging. Your decision to enforce a boundary of truth within your own consciousness was a revolutionary act. It was the declaration, "My mind is not a public park for the enemy's thoughts. It is the sanctuary of the divine spirit, and only thoughts aligned with truth are permitted entry." The divine was shocked by this because it demonstrated complete self-mastery. It is easy to forgive others. It is far more difficult to forgive oneself and dismantle the deeply embedded architecture of self-blame and inadequacy. By consistently affirming the truth of your divine identity, your "I am" statement, you performed a solitary miracle of mental and emotional healing. This reclamation of your inner narrative meant that while the external world could touch your circumstances, it could no longer touch your core essence. You became internally impenetrable The adversary realized that his most potent weapon, self-doubt and internal condemnation, had been disarmed by your quiet, persistent commitment to affirming your chosen nature. This silent, sustained affirmation of grace and identity is the true spiritual shield, forged not in fire, but in the quiet, disciplined contemplation of your worth. Point 5. The gentle discipline of consistent kindness. Even when exhausted and hurt by others, you chose to offer a small kindness, a gentle word, a moment of patience, a quiet help, given without expectation. These subtle acts are the spiritual shock waves that ripple most forcefully through the cosmos. They defy the natural human inclination toward bitterness and demonstrate a heart perfectly aligned with the Creator's own nature. This point addresses the often overlooked area of spiritual fatigue and the temptation toward emotional rationing. When a chosen soul is under intense pressure, dealing with personal crisis, betrayal, or long-term struggle, the energetic reserves for kindness are the first to be depleted. The ego whispers that you have earned the right to be aloof, impatient, or self-focused. You have suffered enough, and the world can wait. The shocking victory you achieved was the ability to override this natural, exhausted impulse and maintain a gentle, consistent flow of grace toward others, particularly strangers or those who did nothing to earn it. This wasn't a grand philanthropic gesture performed for recognition. It was the quiet, almost invisible act, the patience you showed the overwhelmed cashier, the genuine smile you offered the difficult relative, and the quiet decision to clean up a mess you didn't make, simply to ease the burden on someone else. These small, unrecompensed acts of kindness are the true measures of an anointed heart. They demonstrate that your reservoir of compassion is not dependent on your current emotional state, but is fed by a continuous, unfailing source of divine energy. They are proof that the love of the divine is active within you, flowing outwards even when you yourself feel empty. The celestial shock comes from observing this defiance of the conservation of energy. In the physical world, resources are limited. Exhaustion limits output. Yet in the spiritual economy, the act of giving kindness, even when drained, often triggers a reciprocal inflow of energy and grace. You proved this law by operating from a place of spiritual abundance rather than physical scarcity. Furthermore, kindness, when unexpected, is the single most disruptive force against the low vibrational energy in the world. A gentle word offered to someone steeped in anger is like a drop of pure water on hot oil. It creates an unexpected, powerful cleansing reaction. You, chosen one, consciously and repeatedly chose to be the source of that disruptive, gentle cleansing. You chose to be the light in small, inconvenient corners. This consistent, low-key, and pervasive kindness, sustained over time despite your own trials, is what demonstrated a supernatural level of spiritual discipline. It showed the heavens that your default state is truly love, and that you have mastered the egoic desire for self-pity and resentment, choosing instead the quiet, difficult path of selfless service. This gentle discipline is the very fragrance of the divine. Point 6, the ability to bless your detractors. This point requires deep, prayerful reflection. The most surprising act was your quiet capacity to pray sincerely for the very people who sought your downfall. This level of spiritual emancipation, to hold no bitterness or desire for retribution, shows a complete detachment from the earthly ego. It is an act of spiritual authority, proving that you have transcended the pain they inflicted. This alone is a source of boundless heavenly recognition. This spiritual maneuver is perhaps the most difficult for the human psyche to comprehend, let alone execute. The natural protective mechanism of the self demands justice, demands a clear separation from the aggressor, and certainly demands that no energy or grace be extended to the source of pain. To bless your detractors, to sincerely pray for their well-being, their enlightenment, and their eventual peace, is to execute the highest form of spiritual alchemy. It is the process of transforming the poison directed at you into a healing balm for the aggressor, and simultaneously a shield of pure gold for yourself. The shock in the heavens was witnessing a soul who fully understood that the people who attack you are often the most wounded and spiritually blind individuals. They are merely conduits for a deeper spiritual darkness. Your prayer for them was not an act of submission. It was an act of profound spiritual discernment and authority. You directed your focus past the individual, the human tool, and aimed your spiritual energy at the actual root of the darkness that was manipulating them. When you prayed for your detractors, you were not praying for their vindication. You were praying against the spiritual blindness and affliction that compels them to cause pain. This prayer is an immediate dissolution of the cords of resentment and bitterness that the enemy uses to bind you. The moment you sincerely bless those who curse you, you sever the energetic link that allows their negativity to penetrate your field. They can no longer feed off your reaction. You have spiritually emancipated yourself from their judgment and their power. This level of spiritual freedom is a sign of profound transcendence. It shows that the pain they inflicted, the words spoken, the actions taken, failed to penetrate your core identity. Your sense of self-worth is so securely anchored in the divine that you are able to view their actions with compassion, recognizing the pain that must motivate such darkness. This act is the living demonstration of the divine's teaching. It is not just obedience, it is an integration of divine principle into the absolute core of your being. This quiet, compassionate intercession for those who sought your harm is the single most powerful evidence of your anointed status, proving that you possess a heart capable of mirroring the boundless, unconditional grace of the Creator. It is an act of solitary, quiet mercy that the spiritual hosts observed in astonished reverence. Point 7, the restoration of the divine image in the earthly sphere. In your quiet endurance and gentle strength, you accomplished the highest purpose of a chosen soul, to perfectly reflect the nature of the divine back into the brokenness of the world. By maintaining your peace, holding your truth, and offering love in solitude, you allowed the Creator to see his own reflection, pure, unbroken, and powerful, manifested in the crucible of your earthly experience. This is the great work performed alone that garnered the ultimate loving acknowledgement from above. We conclude our contemplation on the ultimate purpose of your chosen life and the final, most profound reason for the celestial shock. The creation narrative is fundamentally about the reflection of the divine within the material world. Humanity was intended to be the mirror, perfectly reflecting the attributes of the Creator, love, peace, patience, and wisdom, into the earthly sphere. The fall of consciousness introduced static, distortions, and cracks into this mirror, making the reflection cloudy and fragmented. Your entire spiritual journey, chosen one, has been the solitary, painstaking process of polishing and restoring that mirror within yourself. The 6 previous points, steadfastness, purity, patience, self-mastery, kindness, and mercy, were all facets of this restoration work. When you maintained peace in the face of chaos, you were reflecting the divine's unwavering stillness. When you exercised patience in the waiting period, you were reflecting the divine's eternal timeline. When you chose kindness over bitterness, you were reflecting the divine's generous nature. The ultimate victory, the one that truly stunned the heavens, was the cumulative effect of all these solitary choices. The divine was shocked, not in a manner of surprise at an unforeseen event, but in the profound, loving recognition of witnessing his own purest nature, perfectly expressed in the most difficult of circumstances, in the crucible of a human life, lived alone, under attack. You, in your quiet, sustained integrity, became a clear, unblemished portal through which the pure, uncorrupted light of the Creator could shine into the darkness of the world. This is the great work. It is not about what you achieved in the world, the titles, the wealth, or the public victories, but who you became in the solitude of your heart. You proved that the divine pattern is indestructible, that the potential for perfect goodness remains, and that one's soul, operating in gentle, consistent alignment, can completely defy the spiritual entrenchment of the material realm. You were the single point of clarity, the quiet, unwavering beacon that attested to the absolute sovereign truth of divine love and power. This quiet, solitary manifestation of spiritual perfection is the crowning glory of your journey and the cause for the ultimate loving acknowledgement from the source of all being. Understand something deeper still. You did not earn this recognition by force, performance, or ambition. You earned it by refusal. Your refusal to mirror darkness, your refusal to descend into resentment, and your refusal to corrupt your internal environment just because the external became hostile. Every moment you chose silence over retaliation. Every moment you chose compassion over collapse. You corrected an ancient fracture in the spiritual architecture of humanity. You became evidence that the fall is not final. The divine looked through your life and saw renewal, saw what Adam forfeited, what generations abandoned, and what fear attempted to silence. You restored trust in the human vessel. You proved that divine consciousness could still inhabit flesh without contamination. In a world seduced by noise and validation, you embraced sacred anonymity. While others displayed their virtues for applause, you hid yours like a treasure. That hiddenness was worship. It was a witness. It was spiritual defiance. The heavens were moved because you showed that love could operate without witnesses, that faith could burn without reward, and that goodness could remain steady without approval. The angels understood the cost. They saw the nights when your heart ached from misunderstanding, yet you still chose gentleness. They saw the betrayals that tried to twist your spirit into hardness, yet you preserved softness. They saw the loneliness meant to break you, yet you turned solitude into sanctuary. Each moment became a stroke of polish across the mirror of your soul, restoring what was ancient, sacred, and nearly forgotten. And now the divine sees his own reflection again, not distorted, not fractured, but burning with clarity. Your life became a living scripture, a hidden gospel written in endurance. The celestial shock is simply reverent recognition. You fulfilled the original blueprint. You became what humanity was designed to be. And that chosen one is the rarest miracle on earth. Chosen one, your greatest victories will often be those known only to you and the divine. The spiritual realm operates on a different metric than the earth, because heaven does not measure achievement by applause, validation, or social visibility. It is not the praise of man that matters, but the quiet, sovereign choices of your heart. Those moments when you refused bitterness, chose growth instead of retaliation, and allowed grace to flow where your ego wanted revenge. The solitude that you often felt was not an abandonment, but a sacred preparation, a hidden chamber where your most profound spiritual work was accomplished without witnesses. In that silence, your spirit was trained to endure, to discern, and to rise. The gentle strength you exhibited, the unshakable peace you maintained, and the unearned grace you extended were all seen, all recorded, and all celebrated in the highest courts of the spiritual universe. You were never overlooked. You were being refined in secrecy. May you now carry this awareness forward, that your solitude remains a consecrated chamber, and your quiet persistence is a profound, disarming power. Continue to walk this anointed path with a gentle, steadfast heart, knowing that the greatest battles are won in the stillness. The greatest breakthroughs are born in the unseen, and the deepest acknowledgments are made in the silence reserved for you and God alone. Be at peace and be well.